And I would just say, if your business isn't making money, that's actually when you should evaluate culture. Your system should be designed to produce profit, and if you're not doing it, it's a people and system design problem. So call that culture. It's a culture problem.
We got here by design. We have an objective, transparent take on every single employee. Any employee in an organization can go to their manager and find out immediately where they stand relative to other people. There was some really material choices that we made that any organization can make as long as they make them decisively. Record revenue, record profit. Many of them were getting ready to leave us, and we just didn't know it.
This whole series is made possible thanks to our friends at Bill and Vermont.
How does a company in a down economy who's struggling, who's selling the exact same products to the same kinds of customers, in just 3 years go from that state of this is terrible to a state of I can't believe how good this is, just by tweaking their culture? I'm going to show you exactly how we did this at CTC and how you can do it too.
Hey, I'm Bryce Ridenour. I am the Employee Lifecycle Manager here at CTC. I work alongside Dane under our Employee Development and Performance department, and we have been on a wild ride over the last 2 years for me, 3 years for Dane. Our culture from 2022 to 2025 has changed quite a bit, to a point where our customers are interested in how we did it. How do we go from where we went to in 2022 to where we are now? And so I would just love to facilitate a conversation with you, Dane, our VP of Employee Development and Performance, and would love to just hear about the journey. And as the leader of that journey, talking to managers on a daily basis, individual contributors on a daily basis, directors, VPs, step in step with the CEO, Taylor Holliday. What was that like for you? And I would love for our listeners to be able to gain insights as to how that journey was.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk about this. And I'm also kind of humbled because the truth is we work with some really, really smart people. The folks who make CTC sing for our customers are just rock stars. The truth, though, is we had some incredible people back in 2022 as well, some really talented folks, and yet we weren't performing like we are today back then. There was something around us. Like if you think of like a culture or an environment or a context where people were doing their work, there was something different then than there is now. And I thought it'd be helpful to get this conversation going, to actually go through some objective realities, some details that contributed to what life was like in that moment and what life is like today. And what I'm ultimately going to land on is that we didn't just drift our way to today. We got here by design. There was some really material choices that were uncomfortable that we made that the truth is any organization can make as long as they're clear about them and they make them decisively. And if you do that, if we, just like we did, I don't think we're special in that regard. I think we were a little bit brave, and we did it with a sense of urgency. And they're the kinds of moves that when you hear them, you're going to go, oh, I could do that. I could see a path for me to do that as well. And that's the hope, that by the end of this, if you have this vision in your mind that you would like to have a high-performance team, we're going to suggest to you that the last thing you want to do is try to convince people to be high performers, to try to convince people to do something they don't want to do. That a much easier path to get to that kind of a culture is actually not to worry about changing people, but to spend all of your energy changing the environment, designing a culture where key employees, high performers, standard setters, they're like a magnet, they're drawn in, and the people who are, they don't want that kind of setup. They're not really that ambitious. Even if they're really talented, they don't seem to be driven, that they'll find that kind of culture unattractive or unpalatable, and they'll just opt out. And if you can get clear that that's what you're going for, whether it's the boom times or it's a challenging time, if you can hold steady in those sets of values, you're going to find your way forward through thick and thin. So what should we do? Should we jump into?
I think we should jump in. Yeah, obviously we're at this boom time, 2025 right now.
Yep.
And before we get there, I would just love to talk about where we were. What was the environment? What was the culture that you came in? You shared a little bit there.
Yeah.
Obviously talking, we still had incredible people, but our mission and our vision were not always necessarily maybe aligned. Maybe they were, or maybe they were just not right for the right people in the seats.
Yep.
So let's talk more about that. What does 22 look like? Take me there.
Well, actually, let's even go back a little further for a second. So another boom time, COVID. If you're in direct-to-consumer e-commerce and you sold almost anything on the internet during COVID, you probably sold a lot of them. There's a lot of brands that emerged in that kind of season, and it made sense, right? People were locked indoors, internet access, a lot of interest in distracting themselves from being by themselves, and a lot of product got moved. And in that exercise, there was a lot of brands that thought this was the new normal, that people were never going to go back to the mall or buy anything from retail, or that they're just going to stay at home and shop until they dropped. And everything was going to go up and to the right. And organizations staffed up accordingly. Maybe your organization was one of them. We certainly were at CTC. But coming out of COVID, I'm going to call it the COVID hangover, we were in a particular state. I would say we were exposed in a way that was very helpful, but at the moment, it was very, very scary. We were at a vulnerable place from a perspective of cash flow. I'm actually going to call it the COVID hangover. We had at the time about 180 employees. That's a lot of employees for an agency like ours. We actually had a strategy on how we were going to attract candidates and who would want to work or how we could get the best talent. Here in Orange County, California, before COVID, we're in a hyper-centralized environment where everyone had to live and work here. But when COVID happened, it opened up a tremendous opportunity for us to hire talent from anywhere. But even back in the olden days when it was just us in Orange County, we were up against Facebook and Google and a whole bunch of other really cool brands, like famous brands like Stance Socks and Vans. And there's so many cool brands that come out of Orange County. And we realized that if we wanted to have great talent, we needed to, and we couldn't compensate like some of these other companies could, we would outcare the competition. That was our internal strategy. So the idea was, let's create as many benefits as we can to have people be drawn in. So we paid really well, we gave really cool titles, we gave incredible benefits, we literally helped employees achieve their dreams outside of the workplace, like funded things like that. And this outcare the competition strategy, it was resourceful from one perspective, but it also created a misalignment with our employee benefits. We were actually incentivizing employees to want to go in a direction that wasn't their work. Even the idea, we had a program here that I was deeply connected to as a consultant called Tell Me Your Dreams. And our job was to actually help employees identify a dream that they had and to fund the execution of that dream. And it sounds cool, and it was cool, until it wasn't cool. Because what ended up happening was we created this wedge between people's work life and their dream life. And very rarely would their dreams actually be to go to work and do incredible things at CTC. And you can see very quickly that there was this distinction between being employee-centric, really focusing on what the employee wanted so we could attract the best talent, while simultaneously kind of forgetting that the only reason we existed as a company was to be customer-centric, to do what our customers needed us to do. So with that misaligned employee benefit, we were kind of in this endless conversation to convince people to do the hard thing, to do the things that was the clear path to execute for our customers, but if it didn't feel like it or didn't match an employee's sense of work-life balance, or it felt like it would cause any kind of tension, it was a little bit of a wrestling match. We also happened to live in that moment, post-COVID, in this phenomenon where the government was actually paying people not to work. So that did not exactly help our recruiting efforts. And we happened to be in a macro environment where interest rates were rising. You guys might remember there was this whole situation where the Fed was raising rates on buying purchases or buying homes. Well, it turned out that cheap money was a big-time driver for people using their disposable income to buy online. So as that began to dry up, that became really tough. We also had the iPhone phenomenon, where privacy issues started shutting down access to data so we could track. It was harder to sell things online in that moment. Again, interest rates rising. Our HR department alone had 6+ full-time employees for a company of 180 employees. And that was terrible, especially when we had to go from 180 to 80. We had to lay off 100 people in 2022. including some HR people. And even before that, in the boom time, people were leaving for like silly reasons, like a little bit of a title change, or they were given a little bit of a bonus money. But where it left us was before things got really tough, before all these government issues and macroeconomic issues were happening, and we're just trying to get butts in seats, and we're at that 180 number, our average tenure was less than 6 months, which is very difficult to build customer confidence when we're changing, who are the professionals working on their accounts, and how do we build sustainable long-term good work. So 2022 is rough.
A lot going on.
And it was around that time when Taylor Holiday, our CEO, again, I was working on this Tell Me Your Dreams thing, and he invited me to lead a retreat. And the retreat was called the Thermostat Commission. And the idea was let's gather a handful of key employees at the company across every area. Some were individual contributors, some were managers in various kind of levels of the organization. And he said, what would it take to convince this group of people to raise their hand and say, I want my dream to be to work at CTC for 3 years. I want to go all in. And even if it's not like a binding contract, to say verbally, this is where I want to be, because it's hard. Because I know that if I go into this environment and we really go for it, that compression will create growth. That this path that we're in right now of like creating so much energy around how to keep the employee happy, that actually doesn't create the kind of environment where you're actually going to not just grow, but progress in your career and actually have an ability to do stuff. And that retreat went incredibly well. 100% of the people who participated said, yes, I would love to be a part of an organization like that. And at the end of it, Taylor pulled me aside and said, I got bad news. You're fired as a contractor, but I have good news. If you'll do it, we'd like to take this idea that we're of trying to treat our employees like thermostats, the people who would go into a room and change the temperature of the rooms they're in, that they would be so standard setting, and stop being thermometers where they walk into a room and they're actually kind of feeling out like what are they going to get for themselves. They're adjusting to the temperature of the room, and they weren't actually leading. So that's what we started. At the beginning of 2023, it was a whole new world of reconsidering what it's going to take to become a standard setting organization, to take this little group, extract the values from there, and build out a serious organization that was going to transform things for our customers.
CTC's unfair advantage is we know that humans trade on trust. What if you could turn every customer interaction right at the point of decision making into a moment of trust building? That's exactly what Format does. AI-powered, seamless, personalized shopping experiences. Format does this with your full funnel solution. They make it as easy to build a full funnel as they do a single ad, leveraging artificial intelligence for a seamless, instant creation of a landing page that creates a personalized shopping experience. It actually lands for the customer like you know them. It actually paves the way for the very trust that we want to build in the marketplace. New product launches, seasonal change. There are these moments where you need customization on the fly and you don't have time to get under the hood and work this out. We have tools for that, and that tool is Format. Check out the link, reach out to them, tell them we sent you. But most importantly, look for the opportunities that they're going to create for your customers to build the very trust you're looking for.
So as the leader of Tell Me Your Dreams, you were pushing people in the organization towards one way.
That's right.
Good people. Good people, very skillful people, very knowledgeable people, successful people in the industry, pushing them towards a direction, Tell Me Your Dreams, which led to some of this very people-centric, people-focused environment.
That's right.
And in an instance,
we changed the game.
You're changing the game.
Yeah.
So that must have been a little...
It was jarring.
For ICs, for everybody.
Every employee. Well, not every employee. Let me talk about those employees, and then I'm going to talk about another little subgroup that was really important. The employees you were talking about, these are good people. The people that actually went on to places like Glassdoor and wrote really terrible reviews about us. And I can't emphasize this enough. These are good humans who we made a contract with. We said, hey, if you come and work at CTC, we're going to outcarry the competition. We're going to do everything we can so that you'll be happy here. What we realized, though, was that was a failed strategy, and we had to pivot. We knew it was not viable. Not only would we not make it, but all the customers we were serving, there was no chance we could do our best work for them either. So we knew we had to change, and we were going to change. But we just got real with our employees and said, look, this is who we are, CTC 1.0. This is who we're going to become, CTC 2.0. And we see it now. If we can just align incentives and have everybody working in the same direction, we know we can do special work. Our talent is where it's at. And for a handful of people who ended up leaving on their own, like literally the first quarter of my job, the first 90 days, I got named in 2 exit interviews as the reason why they were leaving CTC. Huh. And I don't fault them. Like it's legit. But given that we had to make the move, a couple other things happened. Number one, some folks stayed. A lot of folks stayed, and they were actually kind of curious. Like, are we serious? Are we actually going to do this? And how would we actually change our culture? Which we'll get to in a minute. But we also got into some really serious conversations with the top of the top, the cream of the crop employees that we assumed were lifers at CTC, and that was a bad assumption. Many of them were getting ready to leave us, and we just didn't know it. And the reason they were going to leave is because they had the same vibe. We had lost that kind of gritty startup feeling that we had a decade before, and they were like, I do not want to surround myself with entitled employees. This is not going to make me, I actually have ambition in my life. I want to actually get somewhere, and I don't think I'm going to drift my way to greatness. So they told us after the fact, if we hadn't made this move, we were way more at risk than we realized. But we did make the move, and slowly but surely, after a little bit of bumps at the beginning, we found our way.
Wow, love it. So 2025, here we are now, we're thriving. I would love to hear more about where are we? What are the results of 2025? Obviously, we've talked about somewhat of a scary 2022, but the scary is good in the sense of where that shifted us towards as we look to 2025. And would love for you to just dive into that component.
Yeah.
What's the potential?
Yeah. So if 2022 was the before, let's talk about the after. And what I'm not talking about is the process yet. That's the purpose of this whole exercise, is to walk through the methodical way that we designed a different kind of culture. So we'll get to that in a minute, but let's just talk about where we're at today. There are 2 fundamental principles that are in play right now that we didn't have available to us in 2022. The first is clarity, and the second is leverage. We were not clear about where we stood. Even the example I gave a minute ago of the kinds of employees that we had, we just didn't know who the detractors were and who the standard setters were, and who was thinking about leaving, and who was thinking about staying, and who was on the fence watching it and trying to figure out what kind of a culture we wanted to be. And we needed to get that level of clarity. And we weren't sure, like, can you measure culture? Or is culture too kind of ethereal and woo-woo? Like, it had to be concrete. It had to be something you could wrap your arms around. And if you could wrap your arms around it, could we actually create leverage? Could we actually not just understand what's actually going on and communicate with our employees in a way that everyone was invited to the conversation and it could be heard and understood, and to see a pathway from where everyone was at to excellence? But we needed to create disproportionate force in that direction, where, like a lever, we could lean into this culture that we were designing and creating like it was an asset on the balance sheet, that we could actually put pressure on it and it would give us more return than we were leaning into. So clarity and leverage, and what that looks like today are a handful of things. Number one, we have an objective, transparent take on every single employee that's real time. We know, and any employee in our organization can go to their manager and find out immediately where they stand and how we view them relative to other people. And we're going to get into the very specific tools that we use for that. We have a tool called the depth chart. We have another tool called the key employee index. And when you see these things, even if they just inspire you to consider what tool you want to create on your own, it is more doable than you thought. And you were there at this point. When we started making this stuff up, we had no idea it was even possible. Right. And now that we have it and we've shown it off to our customers, they're like, I want that. I want that in my organization.
Yeah, you brought up clarity and leverage. And I think the tools that you've talked about, KEI, that's also bringing clarity for us to recognize how are CTC employees experiencing CTC. What do they think about CTC?
And when you say us, you mean like the managers and leadership.
Leadership, right.
That we had greater clarity as to how they're
experiencing us.
Experiencing
Because
us.
there clearly was a gap, right? You said, hey, some of these people are about to leave and we didn't know that until we got really real in that conference level conversation. If that conference level conversation didn't happen, we lose our leaders right then and there. So how do we not be on the defensive and actually be on the aggressive in that way to make sure that we have control, ownership of our people and how are they experiencing CTC?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tools that we obviously will go into later as to how do we recognize that. Key employee index being one, collective index survey being another, to make sure that we are checking ourselves, right? Hey, quarter to quarter, we want to check ourselves to make sure that we're still in alignment with what we are actually sharing.
Yeah, it really is a two-way street. And I think that that's a humbling exercise to realize that this is not just about our individual contributors, whether or not they're pulling their weight. What we're talking about here is a group of humans that are constantly dealing with, entropy and the drift and losing energy and things are tough and constantly dealing with the storm of the day, the whirlwinds of being a human being, constantly being tempted to take the shortcut to the easy path. And what we knew was in all cases, we as a group of leaders and a group of, even if people didn't have positional leadership, that they could have dispositional leadership, that they could be the kinds of people that could, like the thermostat people, could show up in a room and influence things in a positive, constructive way. So, but none of that happens if you don't have a clear view on it. So transparency was a big part of the equation.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think we have today that we didn't have back in 2022 is a common language. It's very interesting to live in a remote environment and to think about culture design, because we just don't know much about what's going on with the employee who lives in Albuquerque, who we met on Zoom, we've never met in person, we've shipped them a computer, we write them checks, they get benefits. We think they're a human being in the AI world, we don't totally know for sure.
Who knows?
Who knows, but they're in a conversation, picture that person, they're in a conversation in their mind about their job at CTC. Meanwhile, we're in a conversation in our own mind about that employee working at CTC. Meanwhile, we're thinking about our customer, and the customer is in a conversation about CTC and the employee working on their account. It is so complex. Yeah. And if you don't have some kind of common understanding of who we are as an organization, who the individual who's working on the account is, who the customer is, with some degree of clarity, you're not going to get very far. And a common language is a big part of that. And we'll talk specifically about how we achieve that, how we established a common language. First about myself, then about the us, how we all work together, how we could leverage all of the talent, bring everybody to the table so people didn't feel like they were excluded from contributing, and all in the service of a customer-centric culture to serve our customers.
Given all this talk about standard setting, you need to understand this. For your people to do their best work, they need the right tools for the job. For our work at CTC, we think a lot about forecasting and measurement and getting the numbers right. Bill.com does the same thing. Every dollar invested efficiently and effectively. What CTC does for the brands we get to work with, Bill.com does for us. Bill simplifies spend and expense numbers. They connect contribution and performance, and they make accountability crystal clear. At CTC, everyone loves Bill.com. Luke uses it with his team. Tony uses it with his team. Even Taylor uses it. Even Mickey, the guy who's making this video, uses Bill.com. The same should be true for you and your team. So whether you're an agency managing a distributed team or you're a brand looking to raise the standard, check out Bill for yourself. There's a link on screen. Book a demo. Tell them CTC sent you.
And I think that part's important too, because language is so broad, right? How did you land on what is common language? How did you land on a common language? What resources are you using for that, right? I think we probably have a lot of listeners out here that are saying, well, how the heck do you choose a common language?
Which language are you going to go with?
You open up a dictionary and you figure out, I'm going to choose that one. That one sounds good.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. So I don't know if now's the time to talk about that, but.
Well, let me give a nod to it, and we'll go in greater depth when we get in a future episode. So the first thing I'll just say about a common language is what we wanted to do was frame language around two phenomena. One phenomenon is the individual. So we know from a lot of good data that individuals tend to align in certain types. You see this in various personality assessments like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the DISC assessment, and there's a whole bunch of others, Strengths Finder, and there's a zillion of them. But we decided that we needed to find one that was very accessible. People didn't need to become a guru in the personality assessment, but that they could very quickly understand themselves better and understand those they're working with better, especially in moments of stress. So we deal with stress all year long. We're a 24/7, on behalf of our brands that we serve, a 24/7 business. So how do we navigate that when you and I are very different personalities and we get stressed out at the same time? You're going to react one way, I'm going to react another, and things can go very badly. But if we understand each other, and I can serve you by showing up to you in a way that doesn't break things down and vice versa, wouldn't that be interesting?
Absolutely.
So we started with personality assessment. We used the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, but a special version of the MBTI called 5 Voices. Giant Worldwide created this. My friend Steve Cockram actually wrote the assessment, and it is incredible, very accessible. You only have to learn 5 words, and these 5 words will really unlock, not only for myself, but for everyone I have a chance to work with, how to work better with each other. So we'll get more into that common language later, but that is just the beginning of common language. We also have heuristics and phrases and things in our culture that just help us show up highest and best. We also had some resources available to us that a lot of organizations have already, but they don't take advantage of very well. And that's a clarity of mission, why do you exist? And a clarity of values, how do you go about executing on that mission? So you know our mission. Articulate our mission for
At CTC, we are fixated on building the next generation of legendary brands and the people who will lead them. We talk a ton about our values. We have 3 of them. We set the standard. We are driven to increase value, and we create an environment of excellence.
Yes. So in a nutshell, we are fixated on our customer, and we do this in a way where we see ourselves as. We're acting as if we are excellent, that we are highest and best, that we are choosing to do the hard things in a disciplined way every single day so that we can show up as elite, as ambitious and excellent. But not just for me, but also for where I have a sense of responsibility to create that kind of environment for my colleagues. And we work at this every single day. But that's just one aspect of what we have in place right now as part of our culture. Transparency, common language, mission, values. We also have a thing called, I call it womb to tomb enrollment. And this is all about you, Bryce, and the work you do. You're an employee lifecycle manager, which means you concern yourself at the birth of a new employee at CTC, from like pre-birth candidacy, recruiting, all the way to hiring, all the way to the first 100 days to killing it in their job, to ultimately, let's say they have another opportunity they get to launch off to, or something happens where they end up leaving their time at CTC. Talk a little bit about how often we rinse and repeat mission, values, common language, and transparency over the lifespan of an employee.
Oh, yeah, it happens often. I get to be with new hires at the beginning. I'm working with hiring managers all the way till the end, as you said. And for me, I get the opportunity to onboard every new hire, which is super fun for me. So I obviously get a touch point. They're the first face that they see at CTC, day one, into 30-day onboarding surveys, 60-day onboarding surveys, 90-day onboarding surveys, into potentially leadership roles where I'm training managers on the ins and outs of managerial responsibilities in the systems and structures that we have here at CTC. So there's always language around 100% responsibility. I might be jumping the gun here. So
no, you're not. This is all part of it. It's just all in alignment with what it means to be excellent as a collective.
You know, and I like that you said that too, because I actually think there's a level of showing versus telling. And I think the more that I'm able to talk about me taking 100% responsibility, me making requests, having request type of language at CTC, it's something that people either are going to resist and be like, what the heck is that? Or they're going to lean into. And thankfully, within our even adapting our hiring process to make sure that we have the right people, oftentimes people are embracing those phrases and they see that as oh my gosh, thank you so much. That's a level of communication that I can use with a new time manager, right? They can use that, put that in their tool belt, and they're really appreciative of that. So all that to say, that's a long-winded way of saying we talk about our values all the time. I mean, the amount of times that we say that we're standard setters is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's the bar, right? We're more standard setters. It's not, oh, hey, good job, you hit your goals. It's you hit your goals and that was expected. And that's a powerful thing. And I think that's what attracts that caliber of people that we have here at CTC.
So the other advantage that you have that I think is a really cool vantage point within the organization is you have a chance to talk with managers, directors, VPs every single week about their subjective experience about the folks they work with. And you get to hold that against all this transparent objective metrics. We have a whole, well, I'll get to this in a minute, but we have a whole tech stack and tool set to not just go off of a manager's hunch on what an employee and how they're doing, but also how are they hitting their goals? What's their behavior like? What's the affect with the customer? Are they bringing too much drama to the equation or not enough energy to the equation?
The Eeyore tax.
The Eeyore tax, that's right. So in addition to all of these mechanisms to get transparency on and to measure it, you're also tracking a subjective take on how people experience. Talk a little bit about what that's like to see that across the organization on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, so we call them KEI syncs, or 15 minutes. So it's really a quick sync. Hey, how is each employee doing within your realm of responsibility?
Within the last week.
Within the last week. And sometimes, I'll just say this, sometimes we get resistance of, we got to meet every week. But I will say this, the people, and we've gotten to this point, we've delivered to this point where everybody's on board and they actually enjoy those type of conversations because you and I, EDP, are partnering with managers and above, directors, VPs in the organization to support in any way that we can. And not only that, but it also serves as an opportunity, I think, for managers and above to check themselves on, hey, how am I actively pouring into my individual contributors or the people below me? They're not all individual contributors. And for that, that's a really good reflection point. We're all busy. We all have tasks. We got meetings. We're late to meetings because we're already in the last 4 meetings, right? And so it allows for a 15-minute pause in a manager's week to go, how is that person doing? And what do I need to do? Or what resources do I need to request from you and I to help support that individual?
Or challenge.
Or challenge. Support. I think challenge is a part of support, actually. We live in going back to the giant, high support, high challenge is a big part of our culture here.
Yeah.
So you got to have both. And so, maybe those are separate now that I say that out loud. But anyways, back to those 15-minute syncs. They're just a very powerful, really small thing that it's quite a bit of time on my schedule, but I love that because I'm able to actually be more a part of the team, the leadership team, and then also have a sense of what's going on an individual contributor level. And then also, you and I offer a level of coaching as well, and I'm able to take some of that information into, hey, how can you and I help support people in our organization through that coaching and call them up or hire to whatever they're dealing with. So that's probably my favorite part of my job that took, I don't know, we started the syncs 4 or 5 months ago. And I think it's been really powerful.
And now you introduce things like tech enablement or AI, and we see a pathway in the future where we're going to be able to do this even with greater sense of efficacy and less time consuming, but also have an opportunity. We hear this all the time because we do quarterly reviews on our employees, but we're collecting on a weekly basis. So we as an organization at any given time know exactly where each employee stands and where we stand relative to the employee. But when we get to the quarterly review, we're now tracking, we have a lot of data to track, and we're not just asking a manager to go ruin a weekend and write out all these reports that is probably latent with recency bias or maybe a personality breakdown recently, or even some high that you forgot how bad it was 2 months ago. And we get to have the whole picture in one snapshot. And this is not insignificant. The entire organization that we run on right now is not 6 full-time employees around people and culture. It's 2. This is the team.
You're looking at them.
And this effort is with about 75 full-time employees or so right now. So we're more than 100 less than we were in the end of 2022. Yet we are record revenue today and record profit. We also are record client retention on less than 75 employees, and our average tenure of our employees are 4+ years.
Wow.
And all of this set the table, like, again, transparency, common language, mission, values, womb to tomb enrollment, record revenue, record client retention and profit, a proprietary tech stack and tool set that we're going to share over the entire process of this video series. And we're making more money and keeping more money with 100 less people. And the people who work here see a future. They want to be here longer. And so much so, there's so much value created that in this year, we also have a capitalizing strategic partner. This is exciting news that we've had a chance to talk about in a lot of different places. But we have a partner who said, we would like to invest significant dollars in not only helping to acquire part of CTC, but to capitalize and invest into our future. And now we're moving at a pace up and to the right that would have never been possible without our friends and partner. And if I could think of this kind of before and after contrast, it's just shocking to me how the worst of times in the end of 2022 to the best of times right now in 2025. And I would argue we're a far more resilient bunch. If we have other macroeconomic environment situations happening, things like, I don't know, tariffs or,
AI.
or AI kind of adjusting people's reality, or like we are in the midst of hard things and yet we continue to grow in all of these categories. And I would argue that it's humbling to say, because the bulk of the value that we create for our customers is the hard skills of what our team does every single day. But there's something about the container that our team sits in, the culture, that was designed with real care in a very human-centric way that I'm just really proud of. And I'm so excited to have a chance to share this with you all in greater detail, to walk us through how do we get from before to after, what were the contributing factors, and hopefully offer you guys some helpful ways to rethink your own culture. Now, one huge caveat to this, and this is actually going to be the focus of our whole next episode, and that's this. If you're watching this, you're already clearly in a category of thoughtful. You've been working hard on your culture already. This is not news to you that this is an important part of the equation. But I have a hunch, if you're like us, we tried a lot of things that didn't work. And what we've discovered through this exercise of going from before to after is some really helpful explanatory reasons as to why those efforts didn't work. So we're going to methodically walk through traditional moves that most organizations go through and help understand why they don't work and what to do to course correct as we move forward.